everyone. Welcome to a new episode of One Vision, the FinTech Fuse. This is Theo, your host for this episode. Now, this is a completely personal episode to me because I've been running after our wonderful friend, David Jimenez Maireles here. I just learned something about the last name, by the way, for a long time, ever since we met last 6 years ago in Amsterdam. We had dinner at that restaurant. It was pouring rain. That was how I remembered. And we all got soaked after. We had a lot of fun. And then he had been all over the world. And so someone, if you are on LinkedIn, you will know David. You'll see David because he has this mastery of LinkedIn. He shares the best infographic and the best reports ever. I don't know how you do that. I know you will not tell us a secret, which is okay. But David is a very well-known fintech expert, fractional C-suite leader, strategic digital advisor, and just a wonderful friend. Thank you for joining me, David.
Thanks for having me, Theo.
And thank you for taking time away from your wonderful beaches. Anyway, so you were last, oh my goodness. You know what else I remember from Money 2020? We had, you were with Raisin, and oh my God, who was giving out these little orange lions? It was one of the banks was giving out orange lions. ING. So I was sitting with you talking, and I had two of those orange lions. I still have them with me. The kids loved it. That's what I remembered from Amsterdam. Orange lion and a dinner at the restaurant where we all got soaked. It's been a long time since 2019. You went off and built digital banks in Asia. One of them was called Tinax in Vietnam. So tell us more.
Yeah. So first, thanks for having me. 2019, I got the opportunity. Someone crazy called me and asked me if I wanted to build a digital bank. It was my dream. I was talking and sharing a lot of things on social media, but never had the opportunity. So I wonder and realized that the massive opportunity in this part of the world. At that point, 70% of the Vietnamese, they didn't have a bank account. Most of them, they were relying on cash. Access to financial services was only for the privileged, so the affluent and mass affluent. So we did something a little bit crazy. We partnered with a video gaming company to build a bank. So we wanted to build a digital bank, but a brand new. It's not only free banking, but also allow customers, to do things in a very different way. And we chose to partner with this gaming company because our customers, they were playing video games, around half an hour every day. So we said, okay, maybe they are more prone to use, a video game that used to, do banking. So we said, okay, let's turn things around. Let's bring gaming into banking. Let's make banking more interactive, more visual, very simple. We use drag and drop when you wanted to transfer money to your friends. So we have these bubbles, and we put the picture of your friend, so you can actually take the money from your bank account and actually drop it in your friend's bubble. That was as easy as that, to make transfer. We created emoji BFM. We realized when we were discussing with customers that most of them, they have a big challenge. I don't think, it's a Vietnamese, I think, all as we were young, we struggled to have, our finances right. So after doing a lot of, testing, a lot of customer research, we came up with a very simple emoji driven. So, we asked customers what was the budget on a monthly basis. And then we calculate what was the average daily available balance to spend. And then if you overspend on that day, we'll put the emoji crying. Just to make, the customers, like very visual that, they are not gonna make it until the end of the month. our primary customer were Gen Z. Most of them, they got money from their parents on a monthly basis, and usually the last 3-4 days they were eating instant noodles. They have no money at all, so they went to the supermarket, get for a few cents, instant noodles, and that was their food for the last days of the month. So we wanted to make things a little bit more interactive and different. And in a little bit more than 2 years, we reached 2 million customers. So we were happy. We're tracking, what was the happiness tracker, how many customers were using each of our services, and we're super glad that most of our customers, they were the first bank account that they have at that point.
Well, I remember. Okay, so now this all makes sense because I remember one of your LinkedIn posts. You were talking about UX, which a lot of your posts are about UX, but you were talking about emojis and you were talking about Asia. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're the only one who would talk about banking and emoji together. But now this all makes sense. It makes sense though, because it's the demographic you're dealing with. And like you say, you're meeting them where they are, which is in gaming, is Gen Z. I can get that. Actually, I wouldn't mind having emojis popping in my UX too. But so that's super cool. And beyond Vietnam, which you talk quite a bit about, there's also a lot of things happening in Southeast Asia. You are still in Asia at the moment, and you've shared a lot of really interesting examples. Quite a few of those, I remember they have the phone screen, and it's always really, really colorful and interesting looking UI. So there's a lot going on in there. I wanted to pick your brain on, you spend a huge part of your career in Europe, and now you spend a huge part of your second round of career in Asia. How is the digital banking ecosystem different between these two ecosystems? You said something that I wrote down in here. I wanted to ask you, because you said these apps didn't want to be just a banking app. They want to be part of the customer's everyday life.
That's right. I think, the main difference is, in Europe, or in the US, we demand better banking services because it's a given. We all have access. We just want to have banking for the digital age. While here, they still nowadays, 200 million unbanked and 75 million underbanked. So, the opportunity is massive in this part of the world. One of the things, I struggle, when I'm trying to see, and always recommend, to open your eyes and see what other countries are doing, is to bring the bridge between the East and the West. There are a lot of things, happening here. There are so many innovation happening that it's not available, or not, as much share as everything that happens in London on Silicon Valley. So I think, here the ecosystem is a little bit different, because they don't think banking as something you go, something you do. It's something it happens, and it happens when you're buying e-commerce. It's something when you go to a retail store and you scan the QR. It's fully embedded into the daily life, because they have gone from no banking to embedded banking. So they have skipped the branch model. They have skipped the online banking, the mobile banking, and this just it's something, it's there to support their needs. And this is why the ecosystem here, it's a little bit different than in Europe or the US, where digital banks are newly minted fintech companies. While here it's a little bit of mix of telcos, ride-hailing, e-commerce, conglomerates, a lot of players in the region that they have this need. It's in the same way that Amazon, built the AWS because it needed, to expand the services. This is how many of the companies here, they see that the banking industry is not bringing, the products to the masses, and therefore, many of them are left behind in the digital economy. So by, stepping up and, launching, we have seen the likes of SIA launching 3 different banks, Grab launching 2 banks, and investing in another bank in Indonesia. So we see a lot of players trying to make sure that the customers, they have access to the digital services, because we know the biggest churn for many of the companies is at the payment step. So they wanted to fully embed the services and have this one-click vision for the services, so they can ensure more and more customers they have access to order a motorbike taxi. They can order Lazada or Shopee. So they are a lot of players here coming into banking, and with a very big ecosystem behind. And this is why unlike in Europe, where most of the digital banks are they need around 6 to 7, 8 years to be profitable. Here, they usually do within 3-4 years. So, the massive ecosystem, the huge potential of the market, it's making, things very different, in a region where there are 600 million. So it's, almost 2 times, US, tiny and a half Europe. So there a lot of opportunities for new players to grab that market that was not served for so long. So for many, many years, traditional banks copy the same strategy from the West, opening branches. The problem here, alone in Indonesia, there are more than, 10,000 islands. So, how you cover that, the same for the Philippines, I remember in Vietnam, they're like 2,500, point to point, north to south. So many people are living in rural areas. So how you cover that? Good for them. Internet connection is pretty good. It's damn cheap in this part of the world. We're talking about $3-4 to have access to data, and the services available and all the barriers that were preventing these customers to join the financial services are no longer a problem. You don't need, most of the problems were insufficient funds. Banking is expensive. I don't have a branch near me. All these barriers are gone. And now you can, serve a customer in everywhere for a fraction of the cost that traditional bank used to spend to serve those customers.
Is that why we never see you come back anymore? You're like just happily doing things and creating magic over there. But you're right though. It's a massive opportunity to actually make a huge difference. To your point, jumping from not having anything to now going straight into embedded finance, be part of everything that they do. It's truly serving people who need banking services the most. You can't get better than that. So that's amazing. I was just talking to someone actually in recently, and when we were doing a different recording, I said every time when I go visit Asia and I come back and I'm like, oh my God, they're doing all these things. And people always look at me and they roll their eyes. They're like, so what? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. You have to be there to see it, to feel it, to experience it, to like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Why are we not doing that? So I'm not going to ask you why we don't do more. I think the model is different. The needs are different, or I don't know. We just like to do things differently. But to your point, when you say there's the telcos there's the Grab and the Gojek and the likes of them, that changes the makeup of who is in the ecosystem. What about traditional banks then?
So as usual, we see two strategies. Some traditional banks trying to catch up with the digital banking revolution. Trying to transform themselves. Trying to move the transactional services to the mobile banking apps, and another set of them that they are also joining this digital banking revolution and launching their speedboats outside. So we have seen the likes of Standard Charter, launching MOX, launching Trust. The same for DBS with DigiBank in Singapore, in India, and Indonesia. So we're seeing a lot of pressure for them, because if we think digital banking still a brutal force in the West, here it's putting more pressure, because here is the pie. It's much bigger than most of the banks they realize. And now with all the digital banks attracting and luring all these customers to their services, yes, we have seen a lot of new players coming up in the last 2-3 years, and it's still we need to see how they turn into profitability. But it takes time. But we know that once they do, their ability to scale up, it's pretty impressive. We have seen the likes of Nubank, Revolut, and the others, quickly scaling up. And this is one of the things, traditional banks, they see that the fixed costs, it's unsustainable, where their customer base is almost flat. They're doing some incremental growth, but not good enough to sustain their existing business model. That's why most of the banks, they're one of them are trying to follow the likes of ING, BBA, JP Morgan, trying to turn into a digital powerhouse. Some others have decided to take a different approach. It's like, it's going to be very complicated, culture, tech, you name it. We're going to launch a digital only proposition to see and start, moving some of the customers to these channels. Because, if we don't like in the West going to the brands, imagine here when you have to take your motorbike and drive for 30 minutes to go to the branch. That's not sustainable, and that's something that people won't be able to do if you wanted to target beyond the affluent and mass affluent. If you go to the mass market, where more than 60% of the population across Southeast East Asia, it has to be a digital led proposition. And banks are still struggling to get it right. Some good examples, BCA, Mandiri Bank here in Indonesia. We see others like UOB trying to reinvent themselves in the digital banking services. But still, a lot of players. It's very interesting what is happening, as what in the same what Stripe did it. It was like making this digital economy larger and larger. So digital banks are opening suddenly financial services to 300 million that they were ignored for decades, and suddenly they can open a bank account. They may have not a lot of money now, but as they grow up and they're gonna get a better job, they're gonna start a family, their needs are gonna expand, and they are not going to look at traditional banks when asking for these services. They're gonna be looking for a very sleek 1, 2, 3 steps that I can get what I'm looking for in the most embedded experience. So that's going to be very interesting what is going to happen in the next few years, as almost every single country in Southeast Asia, they have a digital banking license and applicants already, in the market, and more are coming. For example, in the Philippines, there's 6 digital banks. Central Bank of Philippines announced that they're gonna be more license to be granted this year. Indonesia, digital banks like Bank Jago, Genius Bank, Superbank, Bank Seko. There are a lot of players, getting a lot of headlines because they are growing, on an exponential rate, and it's something that very few traditional banks they can match, because they still need the branch model, to onboard customers. It's very time consuming. It's not actually available for the masses. So yeah, will be very interesting to see what's happening in the region in the next 2-3 years. We're gonna see, I'm expecting, this year and especially next year, to see a lot of digital banks, turning into green and starting, to grow to, some levels that we have seen. For the time being, it's building time. They're building all the product portfolio. They're growing and improving their cross-selling efforts. But once they master that, as Nubank did it, now customer J on board, they have 4.2 products the first month. That's something that very few traditional banks have been able to do in the digital era. Yeah, in the past, I think, most of them, they were super good at, you go to the branch and you open your mortgage and you open your credit card and you open, your checking account. It was like all in one. That transition from branch to digital, left most of the banks, like, how I gonna play this game, how I can translate that, personal experience. You used to go to the branch, the branch manager will know your name, your family, your kids, you will feel important. And that transition has been, lost along the way. And most of the traditional banks have not been able to really grasp, the opportunities when trying to serve the digital banking customers.
What you said resonated so much. There are a lot of things that resonate. First, what you were talking about to some of the digital banks approach, you talked about Standard Chartered and Mox. I have a Mox account. I actually thought it was crazy easy to onboard. It was so easy. It took like less than a minute. I'm like, oh, this is cool. And then I was trying to navigate through all of the menus, right? It's so complicated. It's not something I was used to. I think that the UI, UX tripped me up a little bit. But then I started thinking, wait a minute, this is not that much different than the Standard Charter services, right? I do wonder if at certain point some of these traditional banks is going to look at this like, are we just basically cannibalizing our own businesses, or are we capturing new markets? I have a feeling it's the former, but wait to see. Because I just like, you think about a space like Hong Kong, right? You don't need that many. There are so many banks, so many branches, and now so many fintechs and digital banks. And I don't know. I thought is interesting. Always fascinating to look at what's going on.
Same for Singapore. We see a lot of players out of Singapore, and you realize, like, there is 98% bank population. Credit cards is one of the highest. The savings account opening, it's very, very high in these markets. So it's end game where most of them, they will be cannibalizing their own business. And unless they realize we're gonna have a lot of consequences for traditional banks about Standard Chartered customers will be migrated to to Mox or Trust. because like it's more cost efficient to serve those customers through these channels. But it was interesting. I think we commented a few weeks ago where some of the digital banks requested to being able to open a
In
branch
person. Yeah.
in Hong Kong. It was like a very fascinating to see digital bank requesting this physical presence. We know that other banks like Revolut has opened like a lot of kind of ATM machines in airports and train stations to kind of reduce the time to market for the customers to actually experience Revolut being able to open a bank account and get the credit card straight away. The same for time in South Africa, where they install a lot of ATMs in supermarkets. So it was a collaboration between a bank and a group that they have a massive retail presence to allow customers, when you enter the supermarket, you can open a bank account there and you can pay straight away with the debit card. So it's gonna be a lot of friction between the digital proposition. The same, we have seen. I was reading that this morning about Open Bank, saying that they reached, $2 billion US in deposits and 60,000 customers. How other traditional banks, they're, trying to, digital their services and launch the other kind of their own ventures, to focus and serve those customers. Unfortunately, in the other side, we have seen the likes of Zine by HSBC shutting down after only 1 year. And it's not the only one. We have seen this for Fin. We have seen, Bo. We have seen many others, shutting down the business because, also at some point, traditional bank committee will step in, say what's going on, like it will hurt my P&L. What are these guys doing? So it will be a watch, to see how some of them are gonna really trigger an approach into how is the best way to serve these customers.
Yeah, I can't agree more. To your point, the P&L, that's going to come in like, wait a minute, what are you doing to my business? I remember seeing in Japan last year, I had no idea. In the 7-Elevens, you can bank in 7-Eleven. They have banking services. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And their 7-Elevens are so nice. It's so chic and so clean, and it's like has so much stuff. It's so different than what I'm used to. It's a fascinating world. You know what? I was tripped up when I was in Tokyo. Because the last time I was there was before COVID.
Okay.
Actually, I was there with Shaw David. I don't know if you know Shaw from London, and so I was there with him. We're doing, I think it was FinTech Week in Japan, in Tokyo, and it was a lot of that was when Apple Card first came out. I was using my Apple Card. People were fascinated with it. The economy was still by and large cash. When I went back to Tokyo this past summer, it was a lot of Apple Pay. It was a lot of QR codes. Some of the terminals, it has like 20 something logos on there, each one with a different QR code app. I was like, how? It was dizzying. I think it was someone was explaining to me because it's from different countries. All the visitors, they have their own apps, and everyone just got used to. That is pretty cool.
So yeah, you see this QR code jungle that you see, and most of the like in the same way that in Europe you're gonna see 4 or 5 POS terminals, depending on the acquiring bank. Here you're gonna see wallets QR, the payment system QR, some of the initiative for other players. So there is a lot of opportunities to pay, and I think one of the most interesting part here in the region is how the interlink of real-time payment systems are fighting head to head with their card payment schemes. The Visa and MasterCard were having a very fancy POS terminal are really not an option for many of these. These are, if you visit Asia, you're gonna see a lot of food street sellers. Here in Indonesia, we have a lot of people like pushing the cart and serving the food on the go. So they go where the customers are. So they go to the hotspots where they can serve the food, and they are walking with the car along the way. It was the same in Vietnam. People selling fruit, selling cha in every single corner. And now with a simple black and white QR code, they can accept payment. The same was in India. Like suddenly you go there and UPI is everywhere, like everywhere, from big supermarkets to street sellers, used by the Gen Z, but also the some older generations also embracing, because it's so embedded, so universal, and so easy to use that you see most of them. And that's the part where now you travel around the region and you will see that the QR codes are getting interconnected. So you can go to Malaysia and you pay with your Indonesian QR code. You go to Japan, or visitor from China, they can pay with Alipay Plus. So there is a lot of connectivity bringing by public and private initiatives, to bring the region together in terms of e-commerce, in terms of travel, in terms of opportunities. You see that in the past, most of these countries, they were relying on tourists from the West. Now you see like a lot of tourists coming from the region, visiting Thailand, going to Japan, and how from QR from Thailand, you can use it in Vietnam, you can use it in Singapore. So it's really interesting how regulators have stepped in and trying to bring each of the countries closer. And we have Project Nexus here happening, and that they are kind of making the interconnection between all these countries in the next few months, hopefully. For the time being, it's more like bilateral agreements, but this project will bring them together, and the opportunities are really, really big for Southeast Asia.
That's amazing. It's almost like a different form of EU forming, but in Asia is even more interesting because I don't know if people understand how different all these countries are, different cultures, different history, different languages. How many countries are there like in Southeast Asia? Like 60 something or
6.
Wow.
In Southeast Asia is
And
6,
six,
but then
and
you
a bunch
open
of
to Asia, exactly, and you have like 15 plus.
it's insane. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the ability to bring them all together, the economic power, it's enormous. It's huge. So to that end, what are you most excited for this year?
For this year, I'm gonna repeat my mantra. I think customer experience. I think it's one of the things banks tend to focus right at the end of everything they do, instead of that to be the beginning of every conversation. And that's something I've been advocating, like, and I'm putting a lot of a post there, like digital banks sell outcomes. They help you to save money for my holidays, or for my new phone, or for anything, rather than selling what are the products. And then banks, they tend to like like, this is my savings account. So I think putting for real customer front and center, and thinking how what's the ultimate goal of banking. And now if you start with that conversation, there are a lot of opportunities. I was mentioning real-time payments, but like, I think we all agree that AI will change this industry like everything else we do forever. But one thing I tend to do when I work with banks is like, what are the technology for? What are you trying to do, right? Rather than, okay, I'm gonna use AI, and then I will find the use case. Is like, no, you find first, what is the business case? What are you trying to do? What is the problem you're trying to solve before you start the conversation with technology. I think that's gonna be really interesting for this part of the world. And I think the evolution of embedded finance, and we have seen not many realize that but many of the innovation happening in banking was driven by this part of the world, very simply. And we have seen in other industry, like scarcity is the mother of innovation, right? So when you have very little resources, you became very creative. And we have seen over and over. And while we came up, we were discussing this with Apple Pay, like you have to have a $1,000 like phone, and you need a very expensive terminal. Here with a QR code that you can print anywhere, it's black and white, every single mobile phone with a camera, it doesn't matter if they have 4K resolution, it will work to scan the code and actually do the payment. So it's one of the things like I really like about this part of the world. They're extremely pragmatic. What is the problem in solving? It's like making payments, it's like savings, this fractional stock trading. We saw that about 8 years ago when they launched their save your pennies and start saving money in the wealth management. Then we see the likes of Robinhood doing fractional shares and all these things. But here was the necessity of all these customers to get access, to have access to products and services that were only available for the affluent and mass affluent. And suddenly here they thought, okay, no, let's revisit like why we don't offer this product and service completely embedded into buy now pay later. We saw the Shopee, Grab, all of them merging ride hailing, food delivery, banking, even airlines like Air Asia, launching their the wallet proposition, because at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to serve customers. Who is the ultimate provider here? There is no loyalty, because before digital banks there were nobody. Traditional banks were not helping, were not available for the vast majority of these customers. And this is why the necessity of being very creative made this region like a hotbed for innovation.
I love this. It's literally, I cannot agree more. Even beyond banking, right? If you look at AI, for example, the recent news about DeepSeek, smaller language models, things that use less resources, it can create amazing results. It's the same thing. It's because of scarcity. They need to be creative. They need to innovate. As I often say, look east for innovation, and you are at the perfect space for it. So thank you so much for joining me today. I will come find you. I will make myself home at one of the beaches that you're in. But it's amazing. I'm so glad you're having a blast and making a change there. So thank you, David. And for the rest of our, thank you. It's good to see you, by the way, virtually at least. And for the rest of our listeners, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of One Vision. We'll talk to you next week.